A very good evening all. I am Aditi Lamba with the Tues edition of South Asian News, Vision of Asia. We are coming to you from our studio in New York City. Welcome to the show. Let's begin by taking a look at the coronavirus pandemic and its impact. The world has surpassed 109 million cases of COVID-19 with nearly 2.5 million deaths. In the United States, we are nearing 28 million coronavirus cases with at least 486,000 deaths. A latest forecast is predicting more than 600,000 deaths by June 1st. So again, as we all wait to be vaccinated, it's important to remember the 3 CDC guidelines more than ever. Practice social distancing, wash hands frequently, and most importantly, wear a mask. The CDC now also suggests double masking to add an additional protective layer against the virus. Meanwhile, the winter storm that has pummeled much of the United States has now moved through the Northeast, leaving a tail of destruction across some states unaccustomed to such harsh weather. More than 200 million people remain under weather-related alert and has hit parts of South and Central U.S., leaving more than 5 million without power in states like Texas, where temperatures are well below freezing. So here's to hoping all of you experiencing frigid temperature stay safe and warm. Also, if you are a frontline healthcare worker or an essential worker, please write to us with your experience and advice on events at itvgold.com. With that, let's begin tonight's news segment reflecting much on COVID-19 and politics. Here are the headlines. Dr. Bindu Balani on coronavirus updates and vaccines, Hackensack University Medical Center, New Jersey. Veteran journalist Rohit Vyas discusses U.S. politics and Biden administration, New Jersey. Indian Consulate presents virtual book discussion, A Different Take by Dr. Singh. A lot more on this side of the break. Stay on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. I am Aditi Lamba and this is Vision of Asia, Tuesday night episode of South Asian News. Let's take a look at the coronavirus updates and measures. In vaccines, today Dr. Anthony Fauci said that he thinks the process of widespread vaccinations will likely start in the spring and large portions of the public will be able to be vaccinated by the end of summer. Governors of many states are asking the Biden administration for more say in how the federal government is distributing these COVID-19 vaccines to local pharmacies and community health centers in their states. The Biden administration has said that it is again increasing the weekly COVID-19 vaccine supply to 13.5 million doses being sent to the states. This is all happening while the nation approaches 500,000 deaths, with public health experts dreading the possibility of a fourth wave, especially due to the COVID-19 variants. On that, there is more evidence suggesting that the UK variant of the coronavirus is linked to more severe disease, which is worrying experts all across as the variant of COVID-19 continues to spread across the United States. So again, it's more important for us to stay vigilant and not get complacent with the coronavirus. Bringing more insight into coronavirus updates and vaccines, including Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, we spoke with infectious disease expert Dr. Bindu Balani. Here is Dr. Balani. We're looking at 27.7 million cases of COVID-19 in this nation with at least 486,000 deaths. We're actually approaching 500,000 deaths in this nation. My question to you is, how are you observing these numbers? And we keep on hearing there is a downward trajectory of these numbers happening right now. What insight could you provide us on that?
So definitely the numbers are unfortunately very dismal, especially with the January. It's been about a year today. Nearly a year since we've had this pandemic going, and the numbers have been unfortunately skyrocketing. Good to know, though, that this past weekend, we were actually just talking about it, that this past weekend we had only 12 patients. I said, whoa, that's really amazing. So yes, we are seeing a downward trend. In the last maybe 5 to 7 days, definitely we've seen a marked decrease in the number of cases, and we hope that it'll continue to do so as time goes on.
Right. Experts are right now worried about a fourth surge of COVID-19. Are you concerned about that?
I am. And we have relaxed our restrictions in the city, in the restaurants, in certain gatherings, etc. that has happened. Plus the patients, the subjects who've taken the vaccines are probably a little bit more complacent, a little bit more relaxed in their social distancing or masking techniques, etc. And then also the whole concept that, oh, the virus, it's not so bad, it's just a little bit of a cold, etc. This particular wrong conception kind of makes them more attuned to not follow the directions as recommended by CDC. It's also been 1 year long. So this particular fatigue that comes along with having the virus and having these restrictions is kind of coming to a head also to these patients, requiring less of the social interacting, less of the masking and universal precautions that are required. So I think I do worry about the fourth spread happening, also with the variants coming along and us not being able to vaccinate as fast as we would have liked to. I think that would also cause increased infectiousness and therefore increased number of cases.
Yes, you just mentioned the variants. Let's talk about it a little bit, Doctor. There's the UK variant, there's a Brazil variant, and there's one from South Africa. They are saying right now that the UK variant seems to spread, the virus more fast, and it's also more transmissible. With the South African variant, due to that variant, South Africa had to stop its vaccine of AstraZeneca. So how are you looking at these variants and their impact on the existing vaccines and the vaccines that are about to come?
So first and foremost, the variants are not new. Yes, we are learning about it a little bit more often now in the media, but the variants have been around since last March. So we had genetic sequencing done showing these particular changes occurring. But of course, case-based variants that actually made a clinical difference probably have started since the fall of last year, with the UK being probably the most likely of the cause, being the most commonest of this particular variant. So amongst the three variants that are currently around, the UK variant, or the B117, is efficacious. The vaccine is efficacious against this particular strain. What we're looking at is where do these particular mutations occur in the virus that leads to whether these vaccines or monoclonal antibodies for treatments will work or not work. It all is dependent upon their binding sites. So with the UK variant, that particular binding site is still efficacious with these particular vaccines. The South African one, yes, it is going to be efficacious, but not at the 95% efficacy that we have today. There would be slight fall down of that particular folds, but we're starting with such a high bar of the mRNA vaccines efficacy that I think a little bit fold drop would still be okay for these particular variants. Regarding the AstraZeneca question that you asked me, yes, there has been clinical data on the clinical trials using the AstraZeneca and the South African participants, where nearly 50 to 90% of patients had the variants, where they found that the efficacy, instead of being the 66 and 72% that they quote in the US, was lower at 50%, 49 to 50%. But it's better than zero. So I still feel that having vaccines on board is going to be efficacious and it's going to be crucial in trying to get these variants under control.
This location is a collaboration between the New Jersey Department of Health and the New Jersey State Police. Both of those agencies approached us and said, we'd like to open a mega site at the Meadowlands racetrack.
We're going to be gearing up to be giving out 2,400 vaccines a day, which is just incredible.
We're going to be able to get people in here both safely and efficiently.
Honestly, there's no reason you can't get this. So well organized, and it was painless.
To those who are considering getting the vaccine, your choice is affecting the people around you and moving the community forward.
We are going to defeat this virus and this pandemic once and for all.
In politics and more, today President Joe Biden backed House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's plan for 9/11 style commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. The president is backing this to shed light on the facts to ensure something like this never happens again in the United States. This push for an investigation comes after the U.S. Senate voted to acquit former President Trump in his impeachment trial on the charges of inciting the insurrection. The vote of 57 to 43 to convict former President Donald Trump fell short of two-thirds majority votes required for the conviction. Many Democrats are furious over the former president's acquittal. Meanwhile, President Biden is traveling to Wisconsin and Michigan this week with a strict focus on defeating the pandemic and reviving the battered economy. On this and much more, we earlier spoke today with ITV Go's senior political commentator, Mr. Rohit Vyas. Here is the conversation. President Donald Trump's acquittal. He was charged for inciting violence on the January 6th Capitol riot attack, and he was charged and he was impeached, but he was acquitted. So my first question to you has to be, how are you looking at this acquittal? Were you expecting it?
Oh, yeah, 100%, because a vast number of the Republicans, especially in the Senate, are looking to take his lead, are looking toward his base of supporters. And I don't think any of them had any interest, any self-interest, to be more specific, in finding themselves face another election and an uphill battle at that. I think all of them want to tap into Donald Trump's base, which is sizable. He does have a huge following, even though he lost the presidential race last year. The fact is that he does have that following, and a lot of people who aspire to higher office, maybe the presidency itself, want to tap into Donald Trump's followers. And so therefore, the last thing they wanted to do was to annoy those followers and be a part of the process of convicting the former president. And therefore, this vote was quite expected, in my opinion.
How did you look at the Republican senators who voted to convict him? You know, I believe it was 57 senators total that voted. How did you look at that?
Yeah, 7 Republicans went with the idea of conviction and with the ruling of conviction. And I think that shows that there are many with a conscience in there. The fact was that this was tried on the merits of the case, which was the fact that the former president, or at least the presentation was that the former president had incited the January 6th riot that took place on the Capitol, an affront to democracy, an insult to democracy, to be even more specific. And I think there were some people with a conscience who stood up and said, that's about enough. Even Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, who voted to acquit, had made it very clear and continues to make it clear in the aftermath of that ruling of the Senate decision that what happened is not by any means excusable. And he's given one of the ways out, which is that while the Senate, in his opinion, was not in a position to convict a former president, as opposed to a sitting chief executive, he did say that there was recourse in regular courts of the United States to try him on such charges in a regular courthouse. So even he spoke with something of a conscience to say, look, what happened was totally unconscionable.
Right. There were some troublesome videos that we saw during this entire trial, videos that were not seen before. How did you look at those?
Oh, those were frightening. Those were from the presentation of those videos, it appeared to be a well-planned attack, not something that was spontaneous or just spurred by the former president's words, but something that was in the planning and in the mode of an attack plan on top of it. So there were it seemed some of it was planned with military precision as well. And as it turns out, many of those arrested have had backgrounds in the armed forces. Many have had backgrounds even in the FBI. There was one prime suspect who, it turned out, used to be with the FBI at one time, and he had top security clearance. And there are many, many such instances that are playing out as more and more information becomes available and as more is known about the suspects involved. So this was by no means a spontaneous act. It was not an act where people were just riled into doing something, but rather a well-planned operation.
Right. You know, before I get into what happened today and what House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said, President Joe Biden throughout the trial basically took a back seat and didn't comment much on what was happening. Do you think that was deliberately done, and was that wise on his part?
Yeah, I think it was wise on his part. I think it was deliberate, obviously. He has indicated from the beginning, once the election was over, he made it very clear. In fact, before the election was over, and it seemed like he might ultimately be elected president of the United States, he was telling party colleagues and others that would soon be in power, that he'd rather see this on the back burner. He doesn't want to play this whole thing out because it's going to take away attention from the agenda of the Biden administration. And the Biden administration's agenda is very clear, is to get a good handle on this pandemic, is to revive the economy, to get us back to a pre-pandemic jobs situation, which was almost 100% employment, and that type of thing. He wants the focus to be on what he wants to do to save America for all Americans. And I think he really didn't want to have this played out and butt its way into his administration's efforts to make some progress now and to take control of the country and have the nation heal.
It's time for another short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be back shortly. Welcome again. I am Aditi Lama and this is Vision of Asia South Asian News segment. Let's now take a look at the Consulate General of India in New York, one of the strongest representation of the Indian diaspora in the United States through many initiatives and virtual programs to celebrate Indian heritage, culture, arts, and language. On that, recently the Indian Consulate presented a virtual book discussion on a different take and NRI view of India in tradition of Ram, Krishna, and Gandhi. The book has been written by Dr. Balram Singh, who addressed all on the virtual discussion discussing several aspects of his book. The book reflects on the global Indian diaspora of NRIs who are essential link between India and the rest of the world, bringing culture and traditions. The book discussion saw Consul General Rohit Jaiswal along with Professor Manisha Mehrotra and Jeffrey Armstrong moderating the event. Here are some highlights from the virtual event on a different take and NRI view of India in tradition of Ram, Krishna, and Gandhi.
The cultural mission and practice in India, that there is nothing beyond your discussion and conversation. Especially I read India's constitution that says that in Article 51A said that is the duty of every citizen of India to develop a scientific temper. So I got more emboldened even as a scientist, and I thought I can take on anything and everything with my best intentions. The most important thing that I thought is going to be a message that needs to be conveyed to the rest of the world, that what India has been and could be. And also in the process, I realized that there is so much communication that needs to be done to Indians, especially in the intellectual class, the political class, and the iconic class of models, role models like athletes and film industry or something like that. I took upon everybody. And so one of the last point I want to make is that one of the issues that came up, taken on so many people in India, is a very litigated country. And people will get offended very easily if they find out that you wrote something about them like that. And so the publisher said that you have to get somebody to write forward so that at least you are protected. And so I contacted Dr. Subramanian Swamy. And he's such a kind man. He has come several times to my campus and he knows that I mean the best for everybody, actually, even those who I'm criticizing sometimes. That has included sometimes the diplomatic corps. And I'm so glad that Consul General has not minded that I have said, but my intention was always to make the best. Their job, my job, everybody else's job, and just like we want to consider Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Subramanian Swamy that he agreed and he wrote 7 pages of foreword. So I think I'm well protected, and now I see that India's real culture, real practice that is practiced by the Consul General, that is practiced by the people who are reading this book and have written some reviews. And I'm so grateful to Jeffrey Armstrong, who is my great friend for last 15, 20 years, with whom I have differed a lot. And then we still remain friends, which is the culture of India. And I met with Professor Manisha Mehrotra maybe 4 or 5 years ago and have learned so much about what she does and what she's interested in. I'm learning more and more every time.
This book, it somehow goes deep into the mind of a person who's grappling with various issues of his own existence, and at the same time of India. And that is this mind space, trying to unlock the mind of a person who's deeply rooted, and what he thinks makes for a very interesting read and makes you ponder and think harder. My own sense going through the book was that it is a book that must be read slowly, for you have to absorb it to understand. It is something like yoga. You have to do little bit of it on a daily basis so that you go to the deepest point of its understanding and observation. That is a session that I would have for the readers. But just to say that I look forward to this discussion. It is a fascinating book. And with that, I look forward to the engaging discussion. And I look forward to what our dear friends, Mr. Armstrong and Madam Mehrotra, would have to say, and what take Professor Singh would have on the book. Thank you very much.
It's a wonderful discourse. And as I've been reflecting upon it, there's a saying, because when I studied psychology, this is obviously something that you think about, is that there's a chemistry between people. But that someone should be a scientist and be a chemist, and also be a psychologist and a sociologist and have a wide vision and scope of humanity. It reminds me of something. When you're rooted in a small town, you always have small town understanding. But when you go to the big city, then you have both perspectives. And this particular book feels to me like a chemistry set. It feels like Professor Singh has given us the tools for conversing about humanity, but he's given them to us as a scientist, as a sociologist, from a perspective inside the culture and from its most biodiverse, primal place where he was rooted, and then he went all the way to the peak of the mountain. So he's given us the entire perspective. Though we've been friends for so many years, when I read the book, I was just so excited and delighted to see that he'd given us a chemistry set for talking about each other without having any conflict, a humorous looking at our various foibles and different aspects of us, seeing how we mix together. So to me, it's such a brilliant contribution to this conversation, because it ensures that it remains a friendly conversation as we continue to ask what's going to happen as we continue combining together. So that's my first observation, that it sets an amazing scientific context for a social conversation that's often been thought difficult to have. He made it so easy. He's taught by his example how user-friendly it is.
That entire heritage of India, what we talking here in this book, has been so beautifully, portrayed in the ghats and the banks of Ganges, what I have grown and seeing it. So in this book, actually, I got to reflect my childhood and the olden days when most of the people in India had a daily ritual of going to the ghats on the banks of Ganges, taking bath, which was a very necessary thing to do to begin the day for. But now, as the time has rolled forward, we have all got busy with our own different things. But still, there is that little, I would say, that Indian thing, the Indianness, which is still there. There are very few cities in India where we still get to see that. So from my perspective, I read that entire book and I found it a very refreshing take on few of the things. Like, actually, I had never thought of Lord Ram or Krishna to be an NRI perspective. So when I read that word, it was really something very strange and a very deep thought to ponder upon. And the way Sir explained it in the book, it actually gave a lot of insights that how our Vedic rishis, the Vedic traditions of the Sanatan Parampara, all of the rishis and all of the, the whole elitist group of the people who had compiled different entire Vedic Samhitas had said things, but they were all symbolic. So in today's time, we need modern rishis like Balram Singh sir, who could really, decipher those and decode those meanings, those metaphors.
Well, this wraps up our show for the night. Please send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook at itvgold. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for free access to many of our popular shows. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.